Yeah, as Bueller said, I am a biodiversity data scientist at the GeoBon Secretariat in Montreal, Canada. And today I'm going to be talking about how our platform, Bon in a Box, can help operationalize biodiversity forecasting. So, for those of you who don't know, GeoBon is a network of over 4,000 experts now in over 160 countries. And they're all researchers who are working to monitor biodiversity change. And anyone can become a member for free. So, if you're not already signed up, please do so at members.geobon.org. But the mission of GeoBon is to coordinate and standardize the way that we measure biodiversity and ecosystem services. Sorry, I'm just starting my timer there to make sure I'm on time. Um, and these essential biodiversity and ecosystem service variables are a standardized way that we measure the different aspects of biodiversity. And I'll talk about this a bit more later. And also the GeoBon community develops indicators which measure biodiversity change. Several of the indicators in the Global Biodiversity Framework, such as the Genetic Diversity Headline Indicator and the Rate of Invasive Species Headline Indicator, were developed by members of the GeoBon network. And the values of GeoBon are built around collaboration, openness, and sharing data, information, and best practices to improve our understanding of the Earth's biodiversity. And so GeoBon is made up of these smaller bonds or biodiversity observation networks, which are all coordinating their biodiversity observations, monitoring, and conservation action. And these bonds can be national, such as Colombia Bon, French Bon, Japan Bon. They can be regional, such as Europa Bon and Asia Pacific Bon, or they can be thematic, such as Marine Bon, Soil Bon, and Freshwater Bon. And these aren't mutually exclusive. You can be part of a national bond, a regional bond, and a thematic bond, but it's just to get groups of people that are thinking about the same kinds of questions and working on the same kinds of things to coordinate their actions and efforts in a more standardized way. And so another major initiative of GeoBon was the development of the Essential Biodiversity Variable, or EBV framework. And this was created as a GeoBon initiative to standardize the way that we measure biodiversity across time and space. So it lays out this set of standardized variables to measure to try and capture the different aspects of biodiversity, all the way from genetic diversity to ecosystem structure. And these were decided upon a number of years ago by different GeoBon working groups, which were centered around these different themes or groups of EBVs. And these working groups essentially decided on these minimum number of variables to measure to try and standardize the way that we measure biodiversity in time and space. And they're meant to be flexible across different ecosystems and realms and taxa and measurement types. This sort of flexibility can make them difficult to understand sometimes. But the idea is that they're meant to facilitate comparisons between different places and allow for this standardized measurement of change. So as you can see in my figure here, an EBV captures the state of biodiversity in one spot in one time point, but the idea is that you can stack them into these EBV cubes, and then you can measure change over time or space. And the idea is that once all of these measured variables are standardized, we can measure change in a standardized way to measure progress towards goals such as the Global Biodiversity Framework. And the standardization is also very important for forecasting, to have time series of variables to measure and forecast trends and be able to run standardized models across space as well. And since they were first conceptualized, they've gained a lot of traction in the biodiversity world. And there's lots of different initiatives to implement them in different concepts or different contexts. I know that Europe just released a set of like 80 something EBVs that they wanted to measure. But there's still some confusion about the concept of EBVs. And one of our goals for the Bon in a Box platform is to help operationalize this concept and get some of these EBV workflows working in Bon in a Box. And so GeoBon's sort of overarching goal is to establish this global biodiversity observing system. And this is analogous to the global climate observing system, which already exists. But the idea is that it would be this network of networks that are all communicating, sharing data, and analyses and best practices to monitor the state of the world's biodiversity and detect trends at different scales in near real time. So the vision is to have this system where biodiversity observation networks are collecting data through different means. This data is uploaded to maybe public repositories through platforms and automated systems. And then these are analyzed through platforms like Bon in a Box to create standardized and updated assessments of the state of biodiversity, or as I'll talk about in this presentation, forecasts of biodiversity trends. I think that's just okay. So this idea of the global biodiversity monitoring system became even more pressing after the signing of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in 2022. And this is where 196 parties agreed to protect their biodiversity and restore nature. And they agreed on a set of targets to reach by 2030 and a set of goals to reach by 2050. And the sort of novel part of this agreement was it was accompanied by this monitoring framework. So there was a standardized set of indicators on which countries had to report to assess progress towards these 2030 targets. I know many of you already know this, but in case you don't. And then GeoBon was named as an observer to help with the implementation of the monitoring framework. So this was one of the impetuses for creating the Bon in a Box platform. So as I mentioned, GeoBon has a number of working groups. One of them is called EcoCode. So this working group aims to synthesize and integrate modeling efforts in support of this GeoBon mission and push for more of an international effort to protect biodiversity. And so the goals of EcoCode are to synthesize current models and modeling tools, create this modeling intercomparison project to evaluate different models around the world and figure out which ones are best for different purposes. One of their goals is also to develop a biodiversity projection platform for biodiversity forecasting, and then just promote the uptake of modeling and forecasting in decision making. So this is the kind of main GeoBon initiative that seeks to integrate forecasting into the GeoBon goals, which includes this system of cooperation and sharing of biodiversity information. And several members and leaders of GeoBon and the EcoCode working group recently published this paper in PNAS. And it's an opinion piece kind of detailing how we need more forward-looking predictive modeling in the global biodiversity framework. So they kind of highlight how the current GBF indicators are more focused on retrospective monitoring, which doesn't give any insight into whether current actions that are being taken are actually going to deliver outcomes and meet these goals and these targets. So they sort of highlight the need that we need a clearer framework to assess and compare the outcomes of different actions and a dynamic system that includes biodiversity forecasting, and that can be sort of regularly updated, similar to this GBIOS idea. And then, the last thing is that they highlight the need to have global coordination on this effort to improve forecasting and include it in decision making around biodiversity. And this paper does actually mention Bon in a Box as an example of a platform to coordinate international efforts, improve model standardization, and build capacity. But as you all know, trying to make a global ecological forecasting system is incredibly challenging. Biodiversity is incredibly complex. It has many different facets, many moving parts. It's affected by human processes that are not necessarily predictable. Um, you have, of course, fragmented and biased data. Uh, an international community of scientists that are working in silos and not necessarily working together, although, of course, this group is a good first start. And there's no established framework for using forecasting models to make decisions. So clearly, Bon in a Box cannot solve all of these issues, but it can help with some of these problems around standardization, coordination, and resource constraints. So now I'll introduce Bon in a Box after that long preamble. So Bon in a Box is a platform to integrate biodiversity data and models to generate useful insights into the status and trends of biodiversity. So it is a platform to calculate essential biodiversity variables and indicators based on a curated open source repository of community contributed analysis pipelines. So this is a schematic of sort of how we see Bon in a Box working for a biodiversity observation network. So you have a Bon, in this example, Columbia Bon. They're collecting data through various means, through satellites, through citizen science, maybe genetic sequencing. And this raw data can be put into a Bon-in-a-Box pipeline to calculate essential biodiversity variables and then eventually indicators. So a pipeline is just an interconnected series of steps or individual scripts. They've been connected through inputs and outputs. I'll describe this more later. But the idea is that because Bon in a Box is running automated analysis pipelines, you can have this sort of circular updating process where users can calculate EBVs and indicators to report progress towards things like the Convention on Biological Diversity. You can also use uncertainty from certain models to inform monitoring effort to actually improve data on the ground. And then hopefully the results of these indicators will help inform conservation effort. So the idea is that we have this circular process where information is constantly being fed into Bon in a Box and then it sort of improves itself. Does anyone have any questions so far, by the way? I feel like I've talked for a while. Okay. And so the large strength of Bon in a Box is that it's community contributed and it draws on the expertise of the GeoBon community. So experts who have developed a workflow to calculate an EBV or an indicator can share these analyses in Bon in a Box, and then they can be run by others in a user-friendly, a transparent, and a reproducible way. And so this bottom-up approach helps disseminate the research of scientists and hopefully helps bridge this gap between scientists and policymakers by increasing the usability of these models and the interpretability of the methods rather than everyone having to read a paper, maybe go to the GitHub repository, figure out the code. They can just parameterize the model, run it in Bon in a Box, and they know it will be the correct implementation. And so this bottom-up approach is really important and integral to the GeoBon mission. These aren't analyses that are being imposed by one institution in the global north. It allows anyone, anywhere to share these analyses and also use the analyses that are developed by others, which saves a lot of time and resources. But of course, we can't just have everyone putting everything in there. So we have this peer review model. I think I have, oh yeah, so we have this peer review model that we've just implemented, similar to a manuscript review. We have 2 to 3 people just go over the pipeline, make sure the implementation is correct. We try to reach out to either the original creator of the method or someone who's an expert in that field who knows what they're doing. So this makes sure that the pipelines are scientifically sound, are implemented correctly, helps to find different bugs and fix them, etc. We also have this completely transparent process, so all of the code is on GitHub, publicly available. Anyone can go look at it. Um, there's also transparency in the tool itself while you're running it. You can see the scripts running, you can see the R logs. It's really easy to understand what's happening. This is not a black box platform. And so now I'll just talk a little bit more about how Bond in a Box works. So a pipeline is composed of these different steps or scripts. And this is just a script in Julia, R, or Python that does a single thing. So we try to have this sort of modular approach where you can reuse these scripts in other contexts. So we really urge the contributor to break up their workflow so that each script does sort of one thing. This can be sort of difficult because you don't want it to have like one line of code, but you don't want it to have too much. But that's part of the contribution process. Each script has these inputs and outputs, and they're in standard file formats. So they can be from stat catalogs and CSVs, geo packages. They can be text inputs for the user to type in. And then they communicate through also standard file formats. So this allows an R script to connect to a Julia script, to connect to a Python script, because these inputs and outputs are just standard formats. So it's really flexible in that way. Each script is described by a YAML description file. So this just describes what the script is doing, has any references, and then specifies the inputs and outputs and what file type those are in. So once you have described your script with a YAML description file, it creates this user input form, which you can see here on the right. So each input has a description to help the user parameterize it. And this is where the user can actually go in and choose what parameters they want for their analysis. And then once all of these scripts have been described with inputs and outputs, you can connect them into a full automated pipeline. So input types have to, when you're connecting scripts, the input types have to connect to the same type of output. Sorry, I said that in a really confusing way. But if you're outputting a CSV, the next script needs to input a CSV. But because these are just standard file types, you can go into our pipeline editor, connect the scripts together, and it's going to automatically run all of these scripts in the full workflow until you have the final results. So instead of having to sort of have different scripts that you run in sequence, it runs the entire analysis in one go. And because we have this sort of modular approach with each script doing one thing, it makes these pipelines really customizable. So for example, you can add a custom step here, you can remove a step, you can really customize it to your own context. So this is what it actually looks like. Here you have the pipeline run interface. So this isn't a very good description actually, they're usually longer, but this is where you have all of the inputs for the pipeline where the user, for example, here they can type in a species, they can choose a country from a drop-down menu, etc. And this is what a pipeline looks like when it's actually running. So you can see each script running in the R logs or Python logs. You can look at all of the intermediate results. You can click on these links and download them. You can look at the references for the script, look directly at the script on GitHub. All of the information is there and it's very transparent. And this is also useful if you're contributing for debugging different issues. And then we also have this more user-friendly results viewer. So when the contributor is creating a pipeline, they decide on the final outputs, so the outputs that they want people to focus on at the end. And all of these will appear in this results viewer. So here we have a species distribution model here. You can look at all of the GBIF presences, the land cover that goes into the model, predictors, etc. So it's all really user-friendly. You don't have to think about or look at the code at all in this interface. And then this is what the pipeline editor looks like. So this would be more on the contribution side if you're contributing a pipeline. It looks a bit scary, and we have some more scary pipelines. We call them spaghetti. But this is where the contributor would drag their scripts from this pane on the left here into the editor, connect inputs and outputs, decide on the final outputs that they want. I'll show you more of this interface in the platform itself later, but they can also put all of the references, all of the metadata, describe the different inputs and outputs, etc. And so now to get back to forecasting, the modularity, customizability, and reproducibility of Bon in a Box make it very useful for biodiversity forecasting. And I'll just say that we don't have any forecasting models in Bon in a Box right now. So if you're interested in contributing, please let us know, because that would be great. So first, forecasting requires iteration and parameter adjustment, which Bon in a Box supports through this user form. So you can run the exact same model with all these combinations of different parameters, and all of the results are saved for you to go back to later and compare. We're currently in the process of connecting Bon in a Box to high-performance computing resources, which will support running models hundreds or thousands of times and comparing results. Um, as I mentioned before, all of the previous runs are saved in the history. So you can go back, you can compare previous models that you've run. The drop-down arrows here show the inputs that you put into that run. So you can see what the differences are. They're all saved here rather than having to, go into your R code, manually adjust parameters, run things, save plots or results. This just makes it really easy to run the exact same model with just slightly different parameters. And forecasting also requires continuous updating as new data comes in. And Bon in a Box connects, well, we try to connect directly with data sources to pull the most up-to-date data and run models. So for example, we have a script that connects to GBIF. Every time you download GBIF in a pipeline, it's gonna pull the most up-to-date GBIF data. But I will also say that all Bon in a Box pipelines can run on your own personal data without it having to leave your computer. This was really important for when we were thinking about countries using this and data sovereignty in different countries, especially developing countries. They don't want to necessarily put their data on public repositories or share it. So we try to make every pipeline able to run with custom data on your computer. Additionally, we have this whole wing of Bon in a Box that's focused on sampling prioritization. So the outputs of models and forecasts can be connected to pipelines to prioritize areas for sampling to try and improve data on the ground and improve future models. So we've done this a little bit with species distribution models. As I mentioned, we haven't done it with forecasts, but I think it can really apply to any model where there's uncertainty to try and improve the data and the model. So I will show the most basic example ever of using Bon in a Box to forecast. So yeah, as I said before, we don't really have any forecasting models, but I hope you'll take inspiration from this to contribute some of the things that you're working on to Bon in a Box. So this is the best one we have, which is modeling future species distributions using Chelsea climate projections for different SSP pathways. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the different SSP scenarios for climate change, ranging from SSP1, which is sustainable, to SSP5, which is fossil fueled development. So I'm just going to show how Bon in a Box can help us explore these different scenarios and the effects on the modeled species distributions. So importantly, we already had a pipeline to run an SDM with boosted regression trees. This actually just went into peer review, so hopefully it'll be reviewed very soon. And we also already had this script to pull the Chelsea climate projections from our stat catalog. We do have our own stat catalog at GEO BON. We would rather not host data generally, but just for convenience purposes, and any of you can use it if you're interested. We have a lot of different layers on there. But we had this script to pull the Chelsea climate projections for the different SSP pathways. So I just replaced the existing script that pulled the current bioclimatic variables with ones that pulled the Chelsea projections. And I had to do it 5 times because the script didn't support pulling multiple layers, but that's something I need to do later. So I used a random species, black cherry or Prunus serotina, to run these species distribution models. And now I'll just show you in the platform itself the process of running these and how Bon in a Box can help compare different outcomes. Okay, so I guess I'll just show you the platform as well since we're here. So this is the homepage here. We have some featured pipelines, descriptions. You can look at the descriptions on the website as well. This is to run individual scripts. So this is more when you're developing a pipeline to test your individual scripts. Some of them need specific inputs to run. But then this is the Run Pipeline tab. So these are all of the pipelines that we have available currently. And you're welcome to download the platform and explore some of these. I'll tell you how to do that. But you can search for different pipelines, etc. All of them have this tag here. So in development, so this means it hasn't been reviewed yet. We're just putting some of our first pipelines through peer review. So none of them have actually been completed yet, but we have, for example, this one is in review. So you can see those tags there, and then they would say reviewed once they are done with that. This is the pipeline editor. So this is my beautiful and very scary looking pipeline for running species distribution models. You have all of the scripts that are available on this left tab. So you can just drag them into the pipeline editor and then connect them, and that's how you build the pipeline. You also have all of the pipelines here. You can make pipelines within pipelines. So you can bring a whole pipeline in as a step to another pipeline. These are the inputs and outputs. You can edit the descriptions, the examples, etc. here. And then this is the metadata. So it has all of the information about the model and the references, the author, the license, etc. And so I will show you how to run a model. So I have the default values here, Prunus serotina. I have the years for the GBIF observations that I want to pull. I'm not sure why that's 2024, probably should be 2026. And then this is a new addition, actually. This is the location chooser, so you can choose a country I'm using Belgium because my partner's Belgian, so I always use it as an example. And then that will give a bounding box for a specific country. Um, Here we have the different SSP scenarios that you can choose from a drop-down menu, and it's going to load the variables from that SSP scenario, and then all of the different climate variables that I want. So I think this is temperature, precipitation's in here, um, land cover for masking water, and then the time span that you want is here as well. So again, super basic forecast, but just for description purposes, I can run this. Most of them should already be cached here, so I can look at my intermediate results. I have my geotiff of future climate here, my inputs, GBIF observations. You have a DOI of the GBIF download to make sure that you can reproduce the exact results that you got, all of the observations. So here you can really see, yeah, what's happening in each step. And I'll go to one that's already run. So here we have the results that the contributor has chosen as the results that they want people to see and focus on. So presence is here, fit statistics. We have our predicted SDM here. And then there's also this results viewer. You can look at all of the results on this more user-friendly. All of the presences, it's a lot. You can see, oh, that looks like a mistake. Just ignore that. So yeah. And then I ran this for 3 different SSP scenarios. So I have 126 here. 585, and I think I have the 3 here. Yeah, 370. So I can go back to my history tab and I can see all of my previous runs, use the drop-down menu and see the specific inputs and outputs to make sure I'm clicking on the right thing. So this is really useful for just comparing different models that have been run with slightly different parameters. So I'll just go back to the presentation here. Okay, it's not going full screen, so that's okay. So yeah, I was able to run it with these 3 different scenarios. You can see a northward shift, et cetera, et cetera. And you can also compare the uncertainties and where the model has better predictive power under different scenarios. So this could help guide sampling prioritization pipelines. If you want to increase predictive power for a certain forecasting model, for many forecasting models, there's a lot of potential for things like this. So, in sum, being able to predict how different actions affect biodiversity outcomes will improve our decision making. Bon in a Box can help support the operationalization of biodiversity forecasting by allowing scientists to share forecasting models and users to run these models in a reproducible way while being able to tweak parameters and scenarios. If you're interested in contributing, please let us know. This is our email, boninabox@geobon.org. We always welcome new contributors and new collaborators. And this is a really emerging field. And so it would be really great to be able to work with someone who's working on forecasting. This is just a plug. Our paper came out yesterday in Bioscience. We're super excited about it. So if you want to learn more about the tool and the platform, you can find that. I should have done like a QR code, but there's the title, so you can look that up in Google Scholar. And there's some very nice figures and descriptions in there. So thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions. And here's our contact information, the website to become a GeoBond member, which I urge you all to do if you are not already. And then our sponsors, some of our funders and collaborators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jory. I believe this is an impressive contribution to the field for all of us and for the modelers, for biodiversity monitors. Thank you so much. Um, are there any questions from the audience? There is actually already one on chat I can read. Could you talk a little bit about how the different models resolve datasets with different spatial or temporal resolutions? Is this something resolved in the earlier stages of the pipeline, or does it depend on which model climate scenario you are using?
Yeah, good question. So it's really flexible. We pull most of our environmental models through a script called load from stack, which loads from any stack catalog, and there's parameters that you can tweak in there. So if you're resampling to a different spatial resolution or a different CRS, you can choose which method you want. And yeah, different aggregation and resampling methods. So it's really up to the contributor. If they had a pipeline that needed to do this, they could leave it open to the person running the pipeline. Oh, thanks for putting the paper link. They could leave it open to the person running the pipeline. So if they wanted them to choose, they could put it as like a drop-down menu. I can show you actually, but so it's really up to the contributor, but you can also, with pipelines, you can set specific parameters that the user cannot change. So if you wanted a certain spatial resolution or a certain resampling method or aggregation method, you could like set that in stone for the pipeline, so the user couldn't mess that up, if that answers your question. I'll just show you. Yeah, so for example, this is where we load most of the layers, and there's like different resampling methods that people can choose, or aggregation methods, spatial resolution, um, temporal resolution if there's a time series and you want only monthly and it's daily, and then aggregation methods for that. So it's really flexible, and really depends on the contributor and what they want to leave up to the user.
Thank you. Go ahead, Cara.
Yeah, thanks. It was super, it's so impressive to see what you guys have put together. I was curious, two things. One, if other than needing to predict an EBV, are there any other criteria that are important for making a model relevant for being included in Bon in a Box, or is it pretty much anything? Are there any structural limitations?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we're still sort of figuring that out. So we've really been focusing on like the GeoBon indicators that are in the GBF and then the GeoBon EBVs. EBVs is super flexible, so that includes a lot of different models. But we've thought about different ways of like structuring the pipelines, like having some that are more like scientific development, having some that are like for reporting, and some that are like peer reviewed, but like not relevant to like the GBF. So yeah, it's a very flexible platform, and that makes it a bit difficult to figure out how we're going to like structure this for different communities. But yeah, that hasn't been totally resolved yet. But like if you have any input on or thoughts or needs, we're happy to listen to those and incorporate them. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, and then just a quick one too, is I was curious because you said there's no real forecasting models on there yet, but I wonder how many of the models that already exist could just be applied in a forecasting capacity, and if there's any potential for reaching out to authors that have already submitted models to say, hey, if your model is also relevant for forecasting, would you be interested in setting it up in a way that it could be used in that capacity as well?
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's definitely a good idea. I mean, this is like an example, like that's not a very impressive model and people have done that, but like I just took a script and put it into a different pipeline. I think there's also like even if the author is not interested in that, the idea is that scientists can really build upon the work of other people. So if you're interested in taking something that's already in there and applying it in a forecast in a yeah, a way that's relevant for forecasting, then you're like free to do that. It's all, publicly available and open. So yeah, we really encourage that as well, because we want people to be improving these models, iteratively and not just having a model and being like, that's our model. So, um,
Yeah, very cool. Thank you so much.
We can go ahead, please.
Thank you, Jory. Sorry, I cannot turn my video on. There are some technical issue. I will need to restart the laptop, and I don't want to do that right now. Uh, it was such a nice presentation. I was always wondering about cooperation of EFI and like Ecological Forecasting Initiative and Bon in a Box or GeoBon in general. And I always was thinking, okay, GeoBon is focused on the biodiversity forecasting, right? Specifically, there are no forecasting of carbon fluxes or I don't know, like FE is doing a lot of with the lake temperature and this kind of stuff. Is there something like this also in GeoBon included, or really this is focused on the essential biodiversity variables?
yeah, so the group that's really focused on forecasting is the Eco Code group. Some leaders of that, Damaris and Mark Urban, were the ones that produced that paper talking about how forecasting um, is the way forward for meeting goals of the biodiversity framework. So they're like intermittently active, I would say. The issue with GeoBond generally is that people are very enthusiastic and very overcommitted. So they do have they have meetings and they have initiatives and things, um, but yeah, yeah, there hasn't been a lot of activity lately, to be honest, but they did write this paper, so but that's the group that's most focused on forecasting. So if you're interested in joining, you can on the members page, you can check. It's sort of hard to find actually, but if you scroll down, you can check different boxes for the groups that you're interested, and you get emails and updates about that group, and you can join meetings. Yeah, I'm not sure if they have any like specific activities going on right now, but that's the group that's really pushing for that. Among other things, they're also, I mean, they're all related, but they have this sort of like biodiversity or the model intercomparison project. So I guess that exists in maybe climate, and they want to make it extend it to biodiversity. So yes, if you're interested in that, sign up, but there definitely needs to be more forecasting work in GeoBon.
Yeah, that's good to hear for us that we are not overdoing something what is someone already working on. Yeah, and I have one more question regarding if I would use Bon in a Box to build a pipeline for forecasting, and then is there option to have like out of the servers of Bon in a Box own dashboard where the end users of the forecasts will be able to check it whenever they want? Or would I need to like pull it to my own server, everything?
Yeah, so I didn't really talk about this, but the way that Banana Box works currently is you download it on your computer, and they're Dockerized systems. So essentially you
Mhm.
have all of the scripts in the Banana Box platform in a folder on your computer. So in either your own GitHub repository or our repository, you can create branches where you're doing your work and you can like intermittently push your changes. They're not like automatically published or anything. Um, so if you want to work on it independently, then that's an option. We usually like to like establish contact with people that are working on things, and just to be there for support. But yeah, it's like we have videos on how to install it and everything, but it's a bit of a
Mhm.
learning curve. One of our big goals for the next year or so is to make it a fully online hosted platform with user accounts that are connected to the GeoBon accounts. So we're hoping that especially for, I think, within the GeoBon community, I know some countries still want it like as a thing on their computer that they have full ownership of. But I think for GeoBon members, definitely that would make it a lot easier and a lot more attractive to use regularly. So that would be like you can, um, upload your own things, make your own pipelines, have your own history all like on the hosted platform. But we do also have, so in relation to the server, you can connect to our server to run it. That's what most people do. You can also put it on your own server if you're interested. It's all Dockerized. So if you have a server, computational resources, or anything that you want to
Mhm.
use in your own institution, it's really portable in that way. But you can connect to our server to run things. We also have an online hosted instance, which you can play with, but you can't like edit things. Um, so I can
Yeah.
put it here, but I have to remember what it. Yeah, does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. It's very nice. I have one more question if I can after that. And then I will leave the floor to anyone else who wants.
No problem.
Yeah, so I have one more question regarding the environmental predictors which are available in your stack catalog. Basically, for forecasting, we want something what is, let's say, as you have in Chelsea, the forecasts for, I don't know, up to 10 years, not the scenarios, which goes for longer than that.
Mhm.
So, or let's say NDVI. Is there any forecast for NDVI or automatical download of NDVR for, let's say, smaller place on the earth, let's say national park or something like that? That we could use that pipeline of automatically like getting the new update of the NDVI as it's available?
Um, so not currently. Yeah. Are you asking like so the you can pull any data source that's accessible through like programming. So anything that's accessible through an API, through a stack catalog. We recently connected to like OpenEO. So you can pull layers, from the Copernicus systems. So
Mm-hmm.
anything that's sort of programmatically accessible you
Mm-hmm.
can access. We do have an NDVI pipeline, but we don't have a forecasting one. Um, but if there's already like forecasting data available for NDVI, you could definitely use that in a pipeline. Um, Even if
Mm-hmm.
you have to like download it, you can still use it. But yeah, currently we don't have a pipeline to forecast NDVI. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
interested in contributing that, please do.
Mm-hmm. But you have a pipeline to automatically download or get the data of NDVI as soon as they are available that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh.
we have
Mm-hmm.
a pipeline that one's through OpenEO actually. So we're pulling data directly from Copernicus, calculating like the red, I think it's red and infrared bands, connect or collect calculating
Mm-hmm.
NDVI and then outputting like a layer in whatever resolution that you
Mm-hmm.
want. So yeah, we do have that
Amazing.
currently, but no
Amazing.
forecasting
Thank you, Jory. Thank you. Thank you. I have no more questions. I will leave the floor.
for the questions.
Are there other questions from the audience? Maybe one more from me. I was just wondering because this is kind of a long-term project and would be super useful to assure its sustainability. I was wondering, um, and also, yeah, in academia and in ecology, it's really hard to sustain like long-term funding. So I was wondering about your funding resources and to what are you actually linked to so that to assure sustainability of this project?
Yeah, good question. So we're in sort of like a period, we have many different lines in the water right now. We're in sort of a period of transition because the GeoBon Secretariat is moving. Bon in a Box will hopefully stay here, but in Montreal. But there's definitely a bit of transition there. We have a few different funding models that we've been exploring. Right now, it's very project based. We got an initial donation from Microsoft that helped like fund the development of the project, but that has run out. So we're sort of on like a project basis right now. So if people are applying to grants to do a project, and part of that is putting it in Bon in a Box. So they like work with us to write a proposal, things like that. We're hoping to move towards more of a like service model. So maybe establishing Bon in a Box as an NGO or like charity status in Canada, and then having these projects with countries to help them. Like it wouldn't be like for profit or anything, but it would be to fund our time to help implement Bon in a Box in different contexts, help maybe work with GeoBon members to customize different pipelines or develop different pipelines that countries need for their different goals related to the GBF. So that's a model that we've been thinking about, but it hasn't been realized yet. But that would be like hopefully they would be able to give us some of their like Jeff money or NBSAP accelerator or things like that. So yeah, very good question. We're hoping that in the next year or so that we have a more sustainable funding model.